All right, welcome to another episode of Tightknit Tuesday. We've recently branded that because we love alliterations here. And so I'm really excited. This one's actually less about the product of Tightknit, but really more about the physical product. It's really about the how do you create great experiences as a community business, uh, and actually building a conference that all of us would want to attend, I think is the better way to approach it. And so I asked David, who was my co-host for a conference that we hosted called oh my God, almost said C3, but CLG. We have a lot of acronyms. We'll cover like all the story. We hosted a conference called CLG here in New York on March 13th. We had about 75 of your top B2B community professionals. Beth included was one of those individuals on the call today. We had founders in the community world. We had VC platform who exist as community builders in the equity space, and then we also had who am I missing here, David? Oh, creators, right? So a lot of the B2B community creators. These are people that are literally building professional platforms where the community, either through membership or through sponsorships, is basically how they create their entire existence and their business around them. So David and I put on this conference. It was I would say, even for us, we look back on it, we would say it was a massive success, and we're very proud of what we did there. So we we got a lot of love on LinkedIn, which suddenly turned into folks like Natalie reaching out and saying, "Hey, how does one create a conference like this?" And we said, "Okay, rather than have a bunch of one-off convos, let's create a space to have it together." And so it's very unstructured, this one. This is really mostly about, giving you all an opportunity to ask us some questions as well. And those will, I'm sure, trigger some thoughts from David and I. But first, I think David and I want to kind of go over like 10, 15 minutes of just the story of how this started. Like, what was our goal? Why did we do it? And we'll go from there. And if you have any questions, yeah, feel free to raise your hand. We'll definitely, have people coming off of mute, asking questions, and we'll do our best to kind of cover as much as we can in an hour. So, um, David, did I miss anything?
No, I think you nailed it. Thanks
Love it.
everybody for being
All
here.
right.
Also, thanks for Caitlin. Thanks for being here too. You also helped out with CLG as a volunteer, so appreciate you being here and at CLG too.
Yeah. Thank you, Caitlin. Again, you had a great group of volunteers. We'll cover that as well, because that's a definite hack for sure to help you as an organizer, as well as just creating like a space for folks to get involved. And um, yeah. All right. So, David, maybe I start with the very beginning. Let's go all the way back to your birthday. Tell us a little bit how the literal idea of CLG started.
Well, I think it starts a little bit more before that though. But so both Zach and I had been hosting events, as Zach showed here. I started this community called C3, which stands, again, going back to all the alliterations, Community Builders Creators Conference. I was a remote community builder, and in 2024, March 2024, so almost 2 years later, or 2 years before, I decided to bring 35 community builders together on a Saturday, for something that I really wanted, which was peer-to-peer learning, peer-to-peer problem solving. We got a space from our friends at Clay. Um, I'd hosted a similar type of event for a community that I was running, and I was like, this is what I would want to do. And I feel like there was a big wave of in-person focused community builders and communities post-pandemic, mostly a lot more social. And they were really growing, and many of those people were my friends. And I thought there was a way that we could come together. So I did that in March of 2024. It was a big success. People were asking when the next one was. Then this space called Fabric opened up a little bit like a month or two later. And then they were like, we want to host the next one. Zach and I were both founding members there. And then we started becoming friends there. And Zach attended one of the C3s, I think in August.
The
Yeah.
third and fourth one.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was August and then November. And that happened in 2024. And then I started experimenting with some other things in 2025. And then towards the end of 2025, as Zach mentioned, was my birthday. And I was hosting this kind kind of like podcast dinner party. And I had recently left my job and was kind of exploring what was next. And then so I just like told nine of my friends, here's where I'm at, here's what's going on. And then, a bunch of different ideas were shared, and one of which Zach was like, you know what? I think let me know if you want to do a conference. I'll sponsor it, and I was like really blown away by that. And then I was like, well, how about we chat about this? And we chatted a couple days later. Um, at a coffee shop in Union Square. And then the idea of like, well, maybe it's, that was one idea was like, hey, I can sponsor, or I'm interested in sponsoring if you host a conference, but maybe we can co-host something, or maybe there's a way to like really think about it differently, and maybe bigger than you're thinking about. And then that was in September. And then we jammed a little bit then, but we were always thinking about a 2026 thing then. And so we kind of put it a little bit on the back burner. And then in December, again, I hosted another event. Zach came over and Zach was like, what are you up to? Like, what's your status? Like, what's going on? And I was like, I literally like 4 days ago ended a big project. And I have like more capacity. He's like, should we do the conference? And I was like, well, do we have like a good venue? And he's like, actually, I just met and learned about this new mall and event space in Chelsea. Hasn't opened yet, but like, I think it could be really sick for this. I'll follow up with them. Like, let me know if you want to talk more about this. And then we quickly started jamming and quickly started like deciding to do this. And yeah, that's like the context and the backstory. And what was really great about this new space was the ability to like kind of do something different and bigger than things that we'd done before, but still feel intimate and cozy and interactive and personalized in a way that the kind of events that I want to do and want to attend. And so then we quickly came together and did it. What did I miss there, Zach?
No, that was a great intro. I think that, yeah, I mean, it maybe even makes sense to tell you like how I got on that same track, right? Like, so David and I, we start in different places, we end up in the same, we go forward, right? And so it's also worth mentioning, right? I think it's even like important. So like David, we did hire David. So like David is my co-host, but there is of course like a financial relationship here. I'm not doing it to make any money. David's business is actually doing events like this. But when we went out to go do this, I wanted to make sure that like it was his brand on it. um, I think that was part of the way, like I had attended. So to give you my backstory, some of you already know, but like I had started Tightknit in about November of 2023 as like truly fresh. And even though this is funny, we both have an origin story with Clay. Clay was our first customer. Has nothing to do with the connection here, but Clay tends to pop up in the New York B2B startup story quite a bit. And we, when I was part of WeWork for a few months. It wasn't really like my vibe. I had been in WeWorks for a while, but doing the like solo WeWork, it just wasn't very inspiring. Ran into the Fabric team, and Fabric gave me a pitch I literally could not turn down. It was this, hey, Jacob's part of this story too, funny enough. So I had just become the Slack community leader for New York City in February of 2024. Jacob was the running Slack's community at the time, and I needed a space because it was really hard to get a space in New York City with the Salesforce Tower. And so all of these things lined up. I found this space called Fabric. By the way, if any of you are in Chicago now, like Jacob, they do a Fabric Chicago. So that's just a little pitch for them. But found this space. It was a bunch of community builders. Again, our direct ICP, the people we really want to know. It's a space that, while argues is not a co-working space, is a co-working space, a space where I can sit and actually do work and be outside of home. And event space, somewhere where we can host. And so David and I have both done events. I would say David's events for C3 much more like thought out than a lot of the events that I was learning. I didn't come from a community manager practice. I've been building for a decade in the community space for Salesforce Community Cloud and digital experiences, but I never actually done the role of community uh, as a job. I did it kind of as a natural community builder. And then Um, Kind of fast forward, went to C3, was blown away. Truly walked in. I just felt like, from a value perspective, I walked out in one of those moments where I was like, my cup is really full, to just go with that analogy of having met a lot of amazing community builders outside of the world that I lived in. Just speaking through problems that I was struggling with and hearing the problems that they were struggling with and getting really unique ideas of like how to go about the different solutions we were trying to solve. And I said, this is a really good approach to bringing together an event. I think a lot of us build content events. I almost call them like audience focused events where you bring in a great speaker, everybody sits, faces one speaker or three speakers, and just sits there and listens. And while those are great, that is like just one style of event. Somehow it has become ubiquitous. Somehow that has become the standard for all conferences, is that we all move from room to room and we listen to content. And I think we forget that the hallway experience is one of our favorite parts of community building. It's the running into folks that we know, having a moment to like chat about the problems that we're facing. And I think David had done such an excellent job with C3 that I felt like if Tightknit was to ever host a conference, it would be that. So fast forward to his birthday, we must have been having a really good sales week, because I think, to go with that story, I actually said $5,000. Like, I literally was like, David, I'll give you $5,000 right now as an initial contract to get this going. A conference like CLG costs a lot more than 5,000. We'll get into like the specifics if you're interested, of like what the budgets you should kind of expect to put on something like this. Um, and yeah, I think the rest of it kind of aligns with what David was saying of, okay, we we put in the idea, and then everything else had to fall into place. Finding a location. I went to an event at the Malin. I kind of knew their head of partnerships already, through other speaking events. And she mentioned that they were opening this brand new event space. And I said, what month? They said March. I was like, wow, that's kind of perfect. That was when David and I were thinking about it. Um, Most folks don't try to do conferences in 4 months of time, right? You try to get at least a 6 months head start. We did it with less. Uh, and they were willing to partner with us. We have the luxury, for sure, that who we sell to are primarily folks like you, who are community builders, who are also running your own events. And so the nature of the conference was a big lead gen opportunity even for them as well, right? If they can get the 70 folks in B2B and in various markets to look at this space and go, I want to do a conference like this, I think it made a lot of sense for them to partner with us. And that helped us find kind of that middle ground to be able to get a really good price point to be able to make this happen. So, all right, I think that's probably, David, and what did I miss on my side?
I think you covered a lot. The things that I just wanted to like reiterate were like, or to also, and I want to hear everyone's questions is like, why there are typically speakers for conferences are ways for marketing or to show the kind of people that are there or to help create content around the conference. So I think that's one of the reasons why why people get speakers is they want to show, oh, like these are the kind of people that we know or that are in our orbit or that are going to be there and stuff like that. So that's why I think it's happening. And then but these days, as there's more and more content, like those insights and stuff are more widely dispersed. And then so then I think the challenge for us was like, can we communicate the value to people of a no speaker led conference at a higher price point? And thankfully, I think like the higher quality vibe of an aesthetic of the Malin helped that. And then I think we really created a real detailed Luma page, RSVP page that talked about the activities. And then thankfully people trusted us um, that like we would take it really seriously and not just put people into a room. And so we did a lot of different small groups curation and pre-event community building, multiple different events and different ways for people to connect in advance. But that was like our side of the story as to, but I'm curious, like Beth, what was it like for you? And what made you want to come um, in a non-speaker conference?
Yeah, so a couple things that you've touched on already. So definitely that hallway vibe. I think the cool thing about community work is like everybody's just so friendly and like there's this sense of community within community work. And so it was also like cool. There's these people that I know online that I also met some folks in person at Toronto Community Week. So it was like the ability to like reconnect with people that I know, um, but also just like the friends of friends and like the new people that I'm going to get to meet. I think it was also the way that you were positioning the event and like the quality of folks that were going to be there. I think the challenge with something like this is it's always great to be like, cool, let's do a mastermind discussion. But there's so many folks who attend those things as beginners to learn from each other. But if everybody's a beginner, then the value there is like a lot harder to sell. So knowing the way that you were framing things and like being at the event, not everybody, was this like huge expert in community. I mean, I was asked to go. I worked in community for like less than 2 years. So, yes, I have experience as like some higher level thinking, but so I think that was a big thing, but it was cool to see some newer folks to community, but so many people who are experienced. And then also just like you said, the format of not having speakers, like just knowing that you're actually going to learn from people. I find like you said, like you go to a conference and it's great to like see people, but like you don't really have that time to like get deep there, download their brain. And like even though we had so many opportunities to connect with people, there's still so many people that I wanted to talk to that I never got the chance to. That I'm like, but like it's impossible to make it that you can actually collaborate with people. And I think it was also a really good size. Like it was enough that you could like get really personal with somebody and that it felt like there was enough people in the room, but it wasn't just this like massive hall of like a million people that you like didn't actually get to have those conversations with. So I just felt like it was this like perfect balance of the right people, the right format, the right level of like experience, that it was just this like magic that kind of came together.
And it's awesome to hear you echo it because I think David and I had this conversation 1,000 times as well as like who is this for? And here's the thing, we've gotten mixed feedback on some of this, right? Like we very intentionally did not only do like my world, the like you Beth, like the B2B community manager who exists in a business, especially B2B SaaS. Jacob, same story, right? Like Natalie, same story, right? We intentionally said, how do we, and David's network actually was probably the good catalyst for this. We brought both of our networks into this story. I think what our theory was that there are a lot of these creators who are trying to meet you, and there are a lot of you who are trying to meet these creators, these folks that are either in VC platform as well, and just trying to broaden the folks that you know. And then I think going back to the seniority level, we actually talked a lot about this as well. And there were some exceptions that we did make, and we had like I can tell you the reasoning behind it. Um, if we try to do only folks that did like 5 to 10 years of community management, I think the conversations would have been the same conversations many people have had for the last 5 to 10 years. I think the ability to bring in new voices, especially folks that may have been new to community as a role, but had lived in customer success for 6 years or had been in product management for 5 years or product marketing and now had taken on the role of community manager. We kind of made some exceptions and said, you know what, while they're not early, they are still early career community people, but because they had this like unique background of how they were approaching community, we felt like they could bring a lot to the table, and they were still very much fit that persona. So like I could put them at any table and they could vibe because they have that like innate community sense. We have some luxury. We hosted a community event for community builders. That is a very lucky thing to be able to do because it's like throw 70 extroverts in some sense, or people who have extroverted tendencies into a single room, and you're probably going to get some buzz. Whereas, like I think there's some real worlds where many of you might serve folks that are not by nature very collaborative individuals, and so there's definitely a different approach to that, right? I think you have to be actually even more careful about putting people at the right table. Um, and I'd say that's like if you were to host your own event for that, you have to think like, okay, what we did actually do this when we wrote down people's names. We said, okay, what would these people talk about to each other? Uh, we did them for different groups. So Beth, I don't know which groups you were in. I'd have to go back to our book, which we can talk about as well. But like we probably moved you between something like, okay, these are people that are around Beth's level. So she has a shared experience with a lot of the folks here. Then there was probably more like maybe psychographic or something like, how do we actually bring you together with folks that we think you're just going to be able to vibe with? And then the topic-based discussions was relatively easy in the sense that here's what Beth wants to learn. These people also want to learn, regardless of where they're coming from. There is ability to bring them together to have a conversation about a certain topic. So, all right, I'll pause there. But like, I mean, I don't know, Beth, does that sound like what you kind of experienced throughout the day?
Yeah, I would say like all the conversations were valuable. I'd say the mistake that I made is like I don't know why I misinterpreted this because I feel like it's very obvious, but like I ended up sitting at the monetization table because a big thing that I wanted to figure out going here was how do I tie community back to revenue and business outcomes, but it wasn't about
Mm,
monetizing community. So that I didn't really get as much out of that conversation because it's not like I have a community to make money and memberships and all these things, but it was still valuable to like talk to the people at that table, but it wasn't directly applicable to like what I was doing. So that was more on my end, even though monetization's obvious and it's not about business outcomes. But that was the one thing mistake I made. But yes, I agree. Like everybody at my table had something to contribute, and it was yeah, it was just like a good level of like, okay, I can give input on this thing, or I'm also struggling with this. And it was very much like a collaborative kind of discussion amongst everyone rather than just like somebody being like, I want to know how to do this. And everyone's kind of like, I don't know. I haven't done this before. And actually, the
Natalie.
person
I,
Oh,
I wanted to talk to the most there because of their experience was a person that I was sitting with in my mastermind group. So I was very like, oh my God, yay, this is what I wanted to talk about. Like, so happy that I got matched with you. So,
Natalie, Sue, Caitlin, Erica, um, what kind of questions you all have? Yeah.
is it, I guess another good question is like Natalie, you're off mute. So I was just going to
Yeah.
call it out in case no one went off mute. Go for it, Natalie.
Okay. Well, my question is kind of stirring a bit, but I guess like when I heard about this, I was like, oh, it sounds great. And I feel like you guys, like the number of attendees was really magical. I'm currently planning a conference for 300 attendees. And so, like, my first thought was like, oh, that sounds awesome. Oh, I could never do that with 300 people. But I am curious, like, and we are doing a mostly like audience focused event with like speakers and, like people listening to the content. But I am curious, like, if you have any thoughts on like how I can incorporate more of this kind of vibe into or do you think it's possible to have this kind of a feeling, this kind of a event with that many attendees? And if so, do you have any advice on how I can accomplish that?
I think I'm going to try to explain it the way that I think David does it, because I actually think David does this well, and I've kind of learned from him. He starts it small and then works you into bigger and bigger groups. I think that's actually one of those like very human ways to approach things is you have a small group that as the day goes on, it's like your core group. Like if you're ever alone in a room, you have that group that you can always go back to and say, hey, like, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? I think having those arbitrary, they don't even need to be like there are different approaches to it, but like David, you sometimes randomly assign people their color groups, right? And so it's like, so they have a group of folks that they may or may not know before they even show up to the conference. Here are just people's names that we want you to kind of look out for. So when you show up, it's like you're in group red. That's it. It's like a weird association. And then I think as time goes on and as the conference goes on, as the groups get bigger and bigger and more people start to meet each other, and so it goes from 6 to 12 to 24, etc. I find that you start to go and open up a little bit more. It's like, okay, with a small group, it's very easy to open up. And then a bigger group, you've already kind of been um, prepped for that next stage. And so I think there's something to do with that. And Natalie, remind me, it's a group of social media folks, or like who's the primary target?
So for the St. John's one, it is like general marketers. We are doing one
Yeah.
in Toronto in October that will be more social media focused, but right now, the St. John's one is more general marketers.
Okay. Yeah. And a notoriously social group, which is again good. So I think you have that luxury again. Um, but yeah, I think there's a way to. I think the question I think there's actually middle ground. I think what David and I did for this very connection led conference, content is in there. It's structured inside the connection side of things, and then these full on content style conferences. I do think there is a hybrid that is also possible to build. I've been to these conferences though where they like treat the last day as like an unconference. Don't do that. Like don't make it like the unconference is the like add-on thing for people like if they are around that day. I'm not a big fan of like of that. That creates a really it undermines what you're trying to build, if that makes any sense. I think the if you can tie it into no content and connection have an equal footing in the conference, I think you'd have a much better approach to that.
And I would start now. Like I don't know when it is, but like maybe there's a virtual event or multiple virtual events that you can do with the people that are attending. Maybe there's ways like we did a welcome mixer the night before. There was like an after party. Like there's ways that I think you can build around the conference as well to help spark that make them feel smaller, but also help spark connection. I haven't been involved with some of these really big conferences, but a lot of these really big conferences also have a like almost enable some of these side events. So maybe there's like some different niches within this 300 group of people that like you could have like a side event for X type of marketing and another side event of another type of marketing, and like those people then could opt into it. Um, yeah, so something to think about there. Of like how do you like as Zach said, like how do you make the big feel small? And but yeah, I think starting sooner than later would be nice too. It's a lot of work though. I'm rooting for you.
Yeah.
uh yeah,
And
so
over communicate, I also think
mm,
that's another thing. I think, we have some negative feedback of like, hey, I received too many emails. That's a good problem. Then I didn't get enough emails. I think there are folks that if they're saying I got too many emails, it just means they still read every one of our emails. It's like, it's still the thing that we wanted them to do. And we had a lot that we needed people to know. This was, I think just to kind of, because this is a new audience, just to tell people how intense this was all setting up. Like it's Friday the 13th. It is always a risky day to choose, even in general. But the venue wasn't even complete until the day prior. We watched the cleaners leaving that morning. It was a wild experience. The bar wasn't even on the bar yet, the bar top. So that's also one reason we were able to get a great discount with the Malin team and be able to work with them and launch this space. So again, finding good partnerships is always key. Um, but and I'm sorry I lost my train of thought there, but I wanted to bring it all back to. I could keep talking more about that in a second, but I think the I think one common connection between people goes a really long way, Natalie. If you can just think of geos, if you like, especially geos is going to be useful because people are going to want to meet up after. If you can think about like years of experience. So like what Beth was saying of like being able to speak, earnestly to folks that are kind of going through the same thing. And then also like David's mentioning, there are different types of marketing topics that you can resurface and bring up. But um, I'd say those are your best approach. The 300 is big. You need to split people more, a lot more. They're probably the largest groups that we had during ours were the asks and offers final section where so asks and offers, you go around in a group, you say what you can provide and what you need, right? So like, here's what I know, here's what I can help with, but here's what I need help with if anybody can help me. It's a really good way to kind of close things out and say like, let's stay in touch, because you actually are finally telling people what you wanted out of the conference. um, and that I think was probably no bigger than like 16 to 20 people per group. Uh, that way you also had time to share and go around. I don't know if you could go much bigger than that and still keep that kind of small group feel. I don't know, David, what would you say is a limit on size?
Yeah, I think 20 sounds about right.
Yeah.
What other questions do people got?
So I have a quick question. During the event, both of you were running around and moderating and coaching and nudging and what have you. Did you go in with a plan in mind as to this is the section I want to get involved in? This is the section, hands off. Let's see what happens. Or was it just organic?
Lazy
I bet you take
facilitation.
that first, David. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a term from Carrie, who attended,
This is
posted.
Carrie Melissa Jones, by the way. Yeah. Just so in case folks want to find her.
She posted some really great, a really positive review of the conference about her experience, but then also she like named some of these things that I think I'd done and Zach had done a little bit more intuitively, and one of which was called lazy facilitation, which I kind of learned intuitively and also through kind of just reps, which was like, as a facilitator, like if you go around to the circles or to the tables, like people are thinking you're going to come up with new instruction or change things up, and so it kind of really like changes the vibe of that group. So like I would go around and I'd say like switch, or this, we're doing this, or this is coming up, and then I would get out of the way. And so there was like a lot of the conference I like literally just like suggested things to do and then got out of the way. I don't know what a lot of people said. um, and that's
And I'm sure,
that,
David, you got that question a lot, right? You're like, what did you learn from the conference? I'm like, David and I learned nothing in terms of community-led growth. We were part of zero of the conversations. I have no idea what anybody was talking about. But I think you're right. We learned through osmosis. And I didn't mean to cut you off on that, but like you and I we know nothing about community-led growth after that conference, right?
but yeah, I think there's a time and a place to be more be more involved and more kind of like lead like a workshop on some of the aspects related to the content or the conversations, but it was mostly like lazy facilitation, as Carrie said, that I think she learned from Daniel Stillman. Over to you, Beth.
Yeah, I just think that approach is really helpful to know, because I feel like sometimes as a facilitator, you're like, oh my God, I need to know all the things and be the person to like make all these things happen. And if someone needs to jump in, like, I don't know, I put a lot of pressure on myself sometimes to be like a good facilitator or to be able to like guide a conversation or whatever. But like that was one thing that I thought was super cool about the event, is it was just like everybody there is driving the conversation. And it's like you don't necessarily, I mean, like you put all the elements in place to make the conversations happen, but you're not dictating exactly what these things should be or like guiding the conversations. It's very much like whatever's valuable for the people in the room. And I thought that that was like a really cool approach, that you were able to like strike a really cool balance.
And just to be clear, when David says lazy facilitation, like, so we put in a lot of work up
Yeah.
until the point of the facilitating, right? Like I think the prep is in getting people into the table and figuring out what questions should be at the table. And I mean, we had, we I gotta give a shout out to Claude, who helped me just take everything that David and I had ever discussed on every call, every phone number, every person's name, and put it into a book that we did reference, at least I did throughout the day. It'd be like, okay, what is going to go on next, and what do we got to be ready for? So, you know, prepping early is nice, and yeah, we literally printed this out at Kinko's. I know it's not called Kinko's anymore, but I can't stop. But um, I think there's a lot of prep that you can do, and then actually the day of, your job is to be so ready that if one of you died the day of, the conference could probably still operate and still be a success. Uh, that said, I do think we have some good feedback. Like, I think one of the things that we wanted to do, which we didn't prep well enough, is we wanted to tell our volunteers that as they went around and did that lazy facilitation, just to keep an eye on conversation hogs, which can always happen and will always happen. And I think there were a few tables where some folks may have owned too much of the conversation. Thankfully, that's another reason why you split up tables throughout the day, so folks don't get caught up in one person and they start to form resentment. But I would say that that would be a good thing to also we could do even better, is like just to really make sure that if that person came back twice and that person was still speaking, that it's a forcing function of, hey, we got to move to the next person. Because if no one in that table is going to take ownership of it, you do sometimes need a parent essentially to come in. um, but I think that's pretty rare.
Yeah, and I would say like um yeah, we could have put like timers on the table or put like a bigger timer on like the main screen. Even though I was being lazy, I was like looking at the stopwatch and my phone and like really just keeping an eye on it, and like wasn't talking to other people or talking to Zach or volunteers. It was like I was locked in even though I was being lazy. But yeah, it takes time to kind of go around. There was 14 tables, so it took time to go around to say switch, switch, switch. That maybe took like a minute. So like there was, that's another thing that like I think we're gonna think a little bit more about, like how can you really like have everybody in unison when you're running these kind of um, time-based sessions. Um,
Yeah, go for
Something
it, Beth.
yeah, yeah.
that I thought was cool with the happy hour thing that you guys had done the night before, which I actually had suggested to my team that we did for a meetup last week, was having the colored name tags as a way to just be like, hey, you're in a group, chat with people. Because things that I had been hearing from a lot of my events was like, I got to meet some people, but I'm not super extroverted. So I wasn't like willingly chatting with a new group, or I didn't feel comfortable like joining a conversation. So if there was more like facilitated networking within your events, this would be helpful. So we ended up similarly like having name tags, but we bought just like colored stickers. So when people, when we went to like that part, we could say like, hey, find all the blue people and chat with them. The other thing that I thought was cool is the harmonica that you used to like get people's attention, but also to be like, hey, cool, like switch up groups or like pay attention. Cause like, we've talked about that as well, of like having music to signal a switch, or just like, because it's hard if you're just like, hey, everybody, like everybody switch, like
Yeah.
to vocalize that. But like, especially in a room of people who are just talking really loudly, but the harmonica was like different enough that you're just like, oh, whoa, like what is that thing? So I thought those two things were like something really simple that anybody could do without the need of like knowing like all these things about people, that just made it really easy to like connect with a group, switch people up, and then like, have a signal of some sort. So both of those things were two really good things I liked.
Nice.
And David's the harmonica guy, by the way. I only co-opted his harmonica.
And
However,
then
I had this, yeah, really old harmonica. Mine's like 50 years old, so it was fun to bring out and play. But
And
uh,
I learned about the
I just,
harmonica from Nick Gray. If you haven't read his book called
oh, okay.
The 2 Hour Cocktail Party, you should read that. It's a great book.
I, I will
Um,
write this down.
And then I think the other one, Beth, you probably saw is when I would make everyone raise their hands. That one I took from Ruthie
Yeah.
Berber, who I'm sure she's learned from others as well. But the
Yeah.
raise your hand and do something, like actually making people do something in order to make sure that they're hearing me. I mean, we've literally been doing that since we were children. So I actually do think we're ingrained to like start listening once you have instructions. Um, and it gets people to also notice people around them doing something. And we are, whether we like it or not, we have a herd mentality. So I think it helps bring people back in the room. How about
Okay.
you, Jacob? Can I pick on you? Any questions from the Vantaman?
Um, can I ask a non-CLG question? Just like about
Heck
David,
yeah.
about you, David.
Sure.
Like what was like your first job?
Oh, first meaningful job or first job? First
However you
job that
want to
comes to
take it.
mind. Yeah, first job
I,
that comes
I
to
know which one
mind.
I want you to talk about. Yeah, let's see if he brings it up.
Ooh, now I'm even more curious about that. I think one of my first jobs was being like an umpire at a baseball game. Um,
Nice.
and meaningful jobs along the way had been in the service industry. I was a waiter in like a bar back in like high school and college, more college.
Mhm.
And and then at one point I also was an Uber driver.
Nice.
And then whatever Zach is gonna say.
I want to talk about the jukeboxes. Tell us about that, David.
Okay, so I wow, how to tee this up. I was working at a startup in a chief of staff like role in San Francisco in 2014 and 2016. Um, and then in 2016, me and the founders came to New York and did like a road show. And as we were like trying to figure out kind of the next big inflection point for the company, and we were a software-based company, and um, we're thinking about ways that we could like widely distribute the software. And so we got in touch with this company called TouchTunes that owns and operates about 70,000 jukeboxes, digital jukeboxes in bars around the world, mostly in the US, some in Canada and some other places. And that was like my main client and helped me kind of like move to New York and kind of execute this high touch um, enterprise partnership with them. And it started off as a pilot, and then it grew into a lot more. And then it was like featured in like the Chicago Tribune. And for I was like new to New York, and I just would like go to these bars and just like watch these jukeboxes and people interact with them. But basically, this software was all about helping people get home safely, and it was kind of like Google Maps on a TV screen was like the software. And so just that was the idea, was like people could stay in the bar longer and as opposed to being outside, and it would get home safely by taking public transit or alternative transportation. But yeah, that was a big like partnership for me. Learned a lot about digital jukeboxes. Yeah, I'm laughing that that stuck with you, Zach. I don't know what your side of the story on that one
Yeah, I
was.
don't know. Something about you walking into every bar and having to look at these jukeboxes and how people are using jukeboxes. I mean, I think that's such a unique job that I don't think most people think about, that there's somebody that has to go and go into every of these bars to sell software, like for, jukeboxes. So that one
What do you
stuck with me
think,
for sure.
what do you think like of these early jobs? Like have any of them informed most the work you're doing today in community? Sorry, this is just me being selfish and asking questions that I'm just curious about that I like asking.
They're good
I mean,
questions.
I think like the um, working in like the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
Like I really like that. Like when you go to a table and like maybe it's like a date and it looks like it's a bad date, and you're like, okay, if they're having a bad, if that's a bad interaction, and then like they're not having a good conversation, like that's gonna affect me and my tip, you know? So like how do I like potentially turn this around, and how do I, surprise and delight them, or how do I make them happier? Um So I think definitely those retail and service
Yeah.
based roles. And I mean, at one point I was working in like right after college, I worked in finance, and I was working, I don't know, 70, 60, 70 hours. And then I was like, you know what? I miss some of that restaurant type of work. And so I uh, took another job, but it was at like the football games, and I would work in hospitality and like the luxury boxes, and just because I liked that, and I missed that, and so thankfully I've been able to find work right now that is a lot more human and
Hmm.
um, connected to people. And and thankfully there's like tailwinds behind this work where
Hmm.
we're able to do it a little bit more professionally. But what about you, Jacob? What's kind of the meaningful job for you that has informed who you are now?
I mean, similar like people first jobs. I was a business major, quickly switched to liberal studies. I
Yeah.
walked into this like rundown liberal studies building and I was like, I feel more at home here versus like the brand new business building that was like overly sterile. Um, but same thing, like whether it was service or camp or summer camp or
Ooh, nice.
anything like that. Yeah. No, I like asking that question because, people in this work come from every background. No one really says like I studied community management in college or my first job was as a community manager. You don't hear that a lot. So, um, I mean, maybe one day, 10 or 20 years
Maybe
from now,
one
maybe
day.
that will be, yeah, think about that. Think about that. Um, yeah. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. What other questions do people have? Unless let's roast David. No, I'm kidding.
And yeah, I mean, you let us know, by the way, if there's like a really specific question. We definitely went deep on this kind of stuff.
I have a question. Maybe you covered this. Sorry, I was late. What was the most popular session or most valuable session from feedback form or just from what people said talked to you about afterwards?
Yeah. So thank you to everybody who did fill out the feedback form because that really helped us. The masterminds was by far, I think, the most popular one. It was the one that virtually got nothing but fours and fives in terms of out of five of like people that really enjoyed that. Uh, I think that one I think we kind of had a hunch was going to be the top anyway, but it really did solidify it. The experiment one, which was the teach me something, was one of the most had the widest range of views. And so the teach me something one was 3 minutes for an individual to teach the group about something that they wanted that they knew. And so the reason we tried that one is we're like, okay, well, we're going to do some sessions where people are trying to learn something. And then we're going to do one session where people are able to give something that they might be able to teach about. And so there were a few folks that had a great time at their tables, right? Like, I love that Mia Moore at Slack, they did a whole thing on orca salmon hats. Like that was pretty funny to me. Like like they asked if they wanted to do like something B2B or something about orcas, and people chose the orcas. But there were some groups that I think didn't do as well because people didn't come with the ability to present anything. I think there's a fair amount of imposter syndrome about a lot of this. It's a very hard to break. We chose every single person because they had some talent and some skill, and it is unfortunate that no one had some for like, oh, I don't know anything when I just know that's not true. And I will tell everybody in that group, I'm like, no, no, actually, you are wrong. Frankly, I'm just going to tell people, some people, you are wrong. Everybody knows something really well. They just assume other people know it as well as they do. And that's always false.
Also, on the mastermind part, we designed that so that was the first main session as well. So the idea was like that, and we introduced the people over email before, so they were already like connecting to that group, and then that was like the what we thought or were expecting to be like a really great session, and that also was earlier in the day, so that like people in theory got value soon and quickly. And so yeah, that was all intentional. Was like, if nothing else, if this I think the mastermind session alone could be, and I've had people say that to me, was like, that was the best thing. And like, that's why I came, or I want the mastermind session again. And like, so I was like, okay, we were like, let's make that's a key focus here. And let's really be thoughtful about the groups that we're curating there. And yeah, the feedback we got from people was that was the top session.
Did you feel the same, Erica? What was your top session?
Yeah, that was my top session. I think the emailing before, so there was like a group, we already had people that was like our kind of crew for the day, and also being able to think through what I wanted to talk about was helpful. So I didn't have to, so like we could just get straight to the point. We all had something we were already ready to discuss and could already start to give feedback on. And then the feedback was super helpful. They asked great questions. I was matched with a really good group. So yeah, that was definitely my favorite session.
Cool.
And I know we're almost at time, but I think Natalie, you've probably been the indicator that you're the one that's hosting the next thing. I'd say the biggest advice on that is, yeah, David and I talked a lot about this, is you have to take a lot of shots on goal. Erica and Beth did not see the 25 things that didn't go right because they saw the 75 things that do go right. A lot of people don't take enough shots on goal, and then when things inevitably go wrong, you just realize you don't have enough. So if you always go more, and some of the things will work, some of them don't, no one's going to even notice the things that don't work because they just never happen. Most of them just never even exist. They never take place. They just run out of time. But if you have all these shots on goal and all these little unique, we did every little thing had something community led. So whether it was breakfast, whether it was lunch, whether it was the happy hour, there was something that I could go up and say, hey, or David could go up and say, hey, this is what this next thing is about. That made it so that the entire day felt like everything, and it was, we did do a lot of work, but everything felt very much like, okay, there was a reason why we're going to get lunch from this group, or there's a reason why this partnership or sponsor is here. I think that really just elevates the experience. So I don't know, David, any final closing thoughts before we close things up?
No, I think the other thing that I was gonna say that you kind of talked about, even though I just said no, I wasn't going to do it, but like I think the power of the co-hosting and the overlapping of the networks, and like I think there was a lot of great synergies there. And Natalie, I don't know for the event that you're doing like what that was, but I feel like we really built in public, and there was a strong overlap between Zach and I, and people, a lot of people already knew us, and we were able to really like build that and take it to the next level together. Um, so um yeah, even though I said I wasn't going to say anything else, but that was another thing that I think really we got great feedback on.
Cool. Well, we got 1 minute left, so I just want to say thank you all for spending an hour with us. Hopefully you got at least one little nugget out of it. But if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot us some notes. And yeah, David and I are already planning, like for the folks that are in New York or coming through New York, we're going to do some little micro events here and there. Because yeah, it does feel like there's a need for a New York community. So we want to help create a little bit more of that space.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I'll be
Appreciate
there.
it. Thank you.
Sweet.
Thanks, Erica.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk to y'all
Cheers.
later. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.